This year, I am knitting 12 pairs of socks over the course of 12 months from my knitting stash. It is called the Emtothethird Sock Stash Along. There's a hashtag down below you can click to see more videos. And I'm getting a little bored since we're at the 10th pair. So I pulled together a bunch of skeins, some of which I've already used this year for socks, some that have been hanging out in my stash, some that are just in my sock stash but haven't been wound into balls. And I've numbered them all, and I've got a 20-sided die, and I am going to randomize the last pair that I am knitting. So I've labeled them all 1 through 20, although this one lost its tag. Wonder who did that. And I'm about to do my first roll. Here goes. The first roll is gonna be for which skein? So number 18. So it's this beautiful like sage color. And then the second roll is going to be for how many rows? So 11 rows. Okay, let's get this wound up and get going. Welcome to part 2 of letting this 20-sided die pick the next stripe in my sock. So the first roll is to pick the yarn. So that's number 7. I think that'll actually look really good with the first bit. And then the second roll is how many rows of each color I'm going to do. So 17 rows. I'm following my typical 72 stitch sock pattern for this pair. And I decided that I was going to do 1 by 1 rib and a total of 30 rows before switching to 3 by 1 rib for like the body of the sock. And that's because I started knitting these socks on my 30th birthday, so I thought that'd be kind of a cute little nod. And that's what the 17 rows look like. Pretty excited with how these socks are turning out. Follow along if you want to watch the progress. Welcome to part 3 of using a 20-sided die to randomly select yarn for my sock. So the first roll is for the yarn that we're going to use. So we've got number 14, and that's this nice little mini skein right here. Definitely an interesting next choice, but let's see how many stripes or how many rows we're gonna do. 7. All right, so not too many. First things first, we've got to wind up this little mini skein. I did want to take some time to show you how I join the next color of yarn because I do it in a way that might be surprising. So even though I'm doing 1 by 1 rib right here, when I start a new color, I just knit the entire row. It looks a little funny on the inside, but I find that I like the transition between the colors better. And then because it leaves me with so many ends, I've figured out this way of weaving in my ends without needing to use a tapestry needle. So after that first row, I then hold the 2 tails in my left hand. And every time I do a knit stitch, I kind of grab the yarns from behind. So I move them to the towards the needles so that when I knit the next stitch, it catches it and it weaves in the ends for me. So here's what those 7 rows look like. I actually finally have enough 1 by 1 rib that I feel comfortable starting the 3 by 1 rib. And yeah, follow if you want to watch my sock progress. Okay, here is stripe 4 of my random scrap sock. So I roll the dice, and the first roll is for which skein I'm going to knit up next. So we've got this fun sort of multicolor speckle, And then the second roll is for how many rows of that yarn I'm gonna knit. So looks like 17. I did have someone ask in the comments what I'm going to do for the second sock, if I'm going to knit it identically to the first one, or if I'm going to repeat this process for the second one. And I am going to repeat the process for the second one. I'm sort of just hoping that there might be enough overlap in the skeins that get used that they'll coordinate. And it'll feel like they go together. Although I did have the thought of maybe making the heels and toes be the same color on both socks, so that it would just be a little bit more clear that they match. Yeah, but I haven't fully decided yet. This is how they're looking right now. Not gonna lie, they're a little funky, but I have faith that they'll come together in the end. So yeah, follow for more updates on my scrap sock. Hello and welcome to part 5 of letting this 20-sided die pick the next stripe in my sock. Can I help you? Moose really likes to be at least a little bit involved in everything I do. But anyway, I'm pretty stoked that this is the next stripe color. The first roll of the die is to pick the yarn, and the second roll is to pick the number of rows I knit in that particular color. Of course, the dice was lost to Moose, so I let her do the next roll. Okay, you roll it. Okay. All right, thank you. Let's see what we're at. 5. Okay. We'll do 5. Thanks, Moose. The first thing I have to do is roll the skein into a ball. Moose is very patient when I'm doing this. Mostly she just wants to hang out with me. But since she is hanging out and being so good, I gave her some pets before I finished up. But the skein seriously is so gorgeous. This is from a Canadian dyer that goes by Orso Yarn Company. And this is a BFL nylon base that I've worked with before and really enjoy. And of course I can't knit without Moose also being in my space. So here she is, just reminding me that she's around and maybe needs some more pets. And this is the sock so far. It's definitely a little funky, but I'm excited to see where it goes. Follow to keep up with this sock journey. Welcome to part 6 of letting this 20-sided die choose the next random stripe in my sock. First roll is for the yarn that I'm going to use, number 9. And that's actually a yarn that I dye and have custom milled for me, because that's the other thing I do is dye yarn. And then this is for how many rows of that yarn I'm going to do. So 13. And let's get started. I'm just finishing up a book, and so what I'm doing right now is actually knitting and reading a book on my iPad at the same time. It's a very cute, cozy mystery series that features a bunch of little like woodland creatures solving a murder, and I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, that's what I was doing while knitting a sock. And this is my little view, my partner going into therapy, and my 30 balloons still up from my birthday. And I'm pretty stoked with how this sock is coming out. Follow for more updates. Welcome to part 7 of knitting a random sock. The first roll of the 20-sided dice is which skein of yarn I'm going to be adding to the sock. And then the second roll is for how many rows of that yarn I'm going to be knitting into the sock. So I also am ready to knit the heel after the next couple of rows. So I thought that I would roll, got an 18, and I am actually going to knit the heel and the toe of both this sock and the second sock with that yarn. And of course, my dog is losing her shit on the carpet. So there are the 2 rows of that chartreuse, and now it is time to knit the heel. Maple. My favorite construction for heels is a heel flap, so that's what I'm starting here. And I like to have a 3-stitch garter ridge on either side of the heel flap. And then for the rest of the heel flap, I do a knit 1, slip 1 on the right side, and just a purl across on the wrong side. And that just gives basically an extra layer of fabric, since that's what rubs against the shoe. It just makes it last longer. So I'll post the turned heel tomorrow. Here is either part 7 or part 8 of randomly knitting this sock as decided by a roll of a 20-sided dice. I finished the heel and the heel turn since the last time I shot a video, and we're on to the next stripe. The first roll is to pick the skein of yarn, and the second roll is for how many rows. And I was not sure about this pick. It's a little bonkers of a skein. Everything else is not as bright. And we're doing 11 rows of it, so let's go. Moose is hanging out with me knitting this morning, and I'm on to basically the gusset shaping or decreases with this skein. I didn't quite finish them all with just 11 rows, but yeah, definitely wouldn't have chosen this option if I hadn't used the dice, which is the whole point. And we're at the awkward point where putting it on a sock blocker kind of gives the best idea of what the sock is looking like. But yeah, this has been an interesting journey, and I'm excited to see what comes next. Follow if you want daily updates. Welcome to part 9 of knitting this random sock. First roll is for the yarn. So this is actually a skein that I naturally dyed. And the second roll is for how many rows of a stripe I will knit. And 8. All right, let's do it. So I know that all the yarns that I picked generally go together, but yeah, I definitely would not have chosen the couple options. So it's fun for sure. I think it looks good. You know, it's just an experiment. But I figured since I only did 8 rows that I would go ahead and pick the next couple stripes, and a 6, which means this is our real first repeat. Again, this kind of bonkers, very colorful variegated yarn, and we're gonna do it for only 4 rows. Okay, so then I decided, because it was only 4 rows, to just pick one more to do for this round. And yeah, it's another repeat. So we're going back to this chartreuse, and again, 4 rows. So come back tomorrow to see what it looks like. Okay, welcome to part 10 of knitting a random sock, decided by a 20-sided dice. So here we go for the next stripe. We've got number 19. That is this gray color that I've already used once. And we're gonna do 18 stripes. All right, but I figured just to speed things up a little bit that I would do 2 rolls for this video. So we've got number 4, and I haven't used this one yet. Look at that bright magenta. And then we're gonna do that for 8 rows. All right, let's see how this goes. I'm so curious as to how the second sock is going to knit up, if there will be any random similarities. But right now, this sock is looking a little more bonkers than I expected it to. I know I keep saying that, and I don't know what I was expecting. But yeah, just keep on knitting, and we'll see what happens. So after 18 rows of the first color and 8 rows of the second color. This is what we're looking at. Welcome to part 11 of knitting a random sock based on what this 20-sided die tells me. First roll is for which yarn I'm going to be using, which is again this like pinky marled one that I dyed. And then the second roll is for how many rows of that yarn I'm going to do, 18. And at this point, I'm pretty sure that this is going to take me right to where I need to start knitting the toe. I already rolled for which yarn was going to be the heel and the toe, and it's this blue. So I'm just going to take that with me as I get comfy to start knitting. I did want to talk about how I knit my toes of my socks. So I usually knit my socks on size US 1 needles, and the first row of getting ready to knit the toe of a sock, I switch to a US 0. It just makes a denser fabric, which makes it last longer, and a friend of mine in knitting group taught me this trick. Then I start doing my decrease rows. Basically at each corner of the sock, I do a decrease, and then I'll knit 4 rounds, and then I do another decrease set, and then I knit 3 rounds. And I do that as the rounds decrease until there's no more rounds, and then I just decrease every round until I have 10 stitches on each needle, 20 stitches total. And then here you'll see I'm doing the Kitchener stitch, which basically just seals up the toe really nicely. And yeah, at this point, because I've woven in all the ends, all I have to do is weave in that toe stitch, and then I can trim all the ends that are left from my little technique of weaving in as I go. I'm pretty stoked with how this sock came out, even though I didn't know what to expect, and I wasn't sure. That was all the ends that I cut off, and this is the final sock. What do you think about it? Follow to watch sock 2's progress. Welcome to part 12 of where this 20-sided die bullies me into knitting a random sock. First roll is for the skein of yarn that we're going to be knitting, and the second roll is for how many rows we're going to be knitting in that yarn. And like I said, this is the beginning of sock 2. I haven't used this dark, it's kind of a green in person. I haven't used it at all in the first sock, so that's gonna be interesting. And so that this doesn't take freaking forever, I thought I'd just roll again. So the second roll is yarn number 2, which I have included quite a bit in the first sock, this like bright chartreuse, and we are gonna be knitting that for 18 rows. So let's do this. I'm really enjoying adding these like bright pops of like acid yellowy green into the mix. So much fun just to not know where it's going. A lot of people have been asking if I'm going to maybe knit a sweater doing the same technique. I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about what I might be able to do for a next project using this technique, because I am having a lot of fun with it. But I also think I might put some kits together for you to be able to do this. So stay tuned for that and follow to see what sock number 2 ends up looking like. Part 13 of knitting a random sock, and we have an issue. So some of you will have seen in previous episodes, parts, that my cat really likes the dice. And so I have been keeping it over here. Let me show you. So I was keeping it literally under this cup because I couldn't even just leave it in the cup because she would dig her little paw in and pull it out. And I thought I'd been pretty on top of like keeping it from her menacing little paws. But yeah, I can't find it literally anywhere. I had gotten this whole little set of custom-made dye from someone who is located in Portland, which is where I am located, Portland, Oregon. And so I'm really freaking bummed. I was like, maybe I put it back in here for safekeeping, but it is not there. So I am going to try and find I mean, we're in Portland. There has to be like a gaming store that has 20-sided die that I can pick up. But anyway, this is part 13. 13 is usually a lucky number for me because my initials are MMM and 13th letter of the alphabet, like, hello. But this is an unlucky part. So hopefully I get a die before tomorrow's video. Welcome to part 14 of knitting a random sock based on what I roll using a 20-sided die. New dice has been acquired, which is great. So first roll for the yarn, second roll for how many rows. And Moose has not learned her lesson and she's still being a traviesa. So I'm going to knit 10 rows of that first yarn. And then I decided that because I don't want this to take the rest of my life, I'm going to knit a couple of rows per episode. So we've got number 13, yarn 13, and yeah, that's the point where she was called away by my partner. And we're doing that one for 7 rows. So I have not used this number 13 yarn or 12. Wait, did I pick the wrong yarn? Wait, rewind. Okay, so I definitely picked the wrong yarn, but it's already knit. We not going back. So that's what the sock looks like. Okay, bye. Welcome to part 15 of knitting a random sock. These last few rows, I picked the wrong skein. You can see in yesterday's video that Moose kind of distracted me, and I'm leaving it, so it adds to the randomness. If you're new here, the first roll is for which yarn I use, and the second roll is for how many rows of that yarn I knit. And today we're going to do 3 rolls because this is taking longer than I thought. And I'm trying to speed up the process just a smidge. I already rolled for the yarn that I am going to do the heels and toes for both socks in. That way they just kind of coordinate, even if they are completely random. And I think that this little section of knitting is going to take me right to the heel. Well, I guess I mean that I'm going to have to knit the heel. So this last skein that I'm picking, I'm really excited to wind up. It's I know it's an indie dyed skein from Massachusetts when I lived there that obviously I've been stashing for a while. And first things first, we gotta wind it into a ball. So do that really quick, and it's gonna be a good addition. They all kind of go together. So it's a rainy day. I'm cuddling with Moose, who has been forgiven for losing my first dice. Follow for updates. Part 16 of knitting a random sock. This is what the socks are looking like after turning the heel, and this is what my partner thinks of them. I'm re-uploading this because for some reason the first time it had the captions with all of the audio, but didn't actually save my voiceover. So yeah, this is where you will find me for the rest of the winter, basically on a couch, on a throne, under a blanket. And I'm just finishing up the last 3 stripes that I rolled for, and picking up all the stitches along the heel flap. My favorite way of knitting socks is with a heel flap that's slightly reinforced. I think it just makes the best fitting sock in my opinion. I've knit basically every type of sock, and this is always my go-to. So yeah, I'm just gonna be sitting here watching Great British Baking Show and knitting my sock and forgetting about Mexican week. Whew. I'm pretty excited to have turned the heel though, because I really feel like the end is in sight. Yeah, and in a second I'll show you what the sock is looking like. Oh, there's Moose's tail. But yeah, here's where we're at. Definitely getting close to the end. So follow if you want to see the end of this saga. Here's part 17 of knitting random socks. This is what they're looking like, and we're going to pick 4 stripes out today. Number 4, which is this amazing magenta, and we're going to do that for 6 rows. And then number 11, which is Oh, I just knit a pair of socks in this yarn. It's like a yak sock. And we're gonna do that for, oops. I'm surprised I haven't done that more often. 10 rows, okay. Then we're doing number 14, which is, this one has been correctly identified by several people as a Farmer's Daughter Sock Squad mini. We're gonna do that one for 11 rows. And then last but certainly not least, the first 20 that I have rolled in this entire series. We're doing this, oops, try that again, for 3 rows. That's funny. So I'm gonna wind this whole skein just for 3 rows, but we're truly coming to the end. I'm knitting these 4 rows stripes while watching Ginger Snaps with my grandma. If you've seen that movie, it's like a coming of age werewolf movie about like 90s grunge kids, girls, I don't know. So here's what the socks looked like this morning. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to finish today. So stay tuned for the last part tomorrow. Welcome to part 18 of Knitting a Random Sock. And today we're finishing up the second sock. So this is the last part in the series. This is what the sock is looking like after the last 4 rows. And I also wanted to show you how I've been keeping track of what I'm knitting so that I can like actually enjoy myself, which is putting it on this whiteboard. Also, my Yaya is visiting. Hi, Yaya. So after I roll the dice, I'm gonna start with a 5. Oh, Moose distracted me for a second. And then I roll again for how many rows. I go over to my whiteboard and write that down. And then I roll again. And so now it's color 11, yarn 11 for 7 rows. And I go back over here and write that down. And yeah, so that's how I'm keeping track so that I can kind of hang out on my throne on the couch and knit a few stripes at a time. So yeah, those are the last couple yarns, and I also brought over the yarn for the toe. I'm hanging out, drinking my coffee, and this is my view of the whiteboard so that I know how many rows to do. I'm reading Jeanette McCurdy's book, and I also put on cat TV for Moose because she was bugging me. But here's the final sock. I am so happy with how it turned out, and I think they actually work super well as a pair. Thanks for hanging out on this sock journey with me. Of course, here are the 2 socks together. The first one is this one, and the second one is this one. I'm so happy with how they turned out. I think they're so cute.